What's up, guys? Happy Tuesday. Welcome back to another episode of Eat, Train, Prosper. Today is Bryan and myself, and our episode for today is going to be on our favorite movements for each muscle group, and more importantly, why. Before we jump into this, which was it was a question provided to us for our last Instagram Q&A, which was last week's episode, if you have not caught that. And we thought it would be a fun question just to expand into its own episode. So here we are. Before we jump into that, Bryan is going to kick us off with some updates.
Yeah, I'll try and be quick here and get us to the topic du jour as quickly as possible. So I am now 5 weeks out from PRP. Last week I wasn't sure if it was 3 or 4 weeks. It is in fact now 5 weeks. Things are improving. I would say my function is still not that of before PRP, but still optimistic that it's going to be good. I am using my hack squat in my basement as kind of the representation of my knee healing week to week as it progresses through. So my top weight ever on it is something like 560 for 7 or 8. And the way I've been progressing through is the first week I did nothing on it. I didn't do any legs. And then it was 200 for 10. Next week was 300 for 10. Then the next week was 400 for 10. And then just this week I hit 500 for 10, which I think is getting close to that, 560 for 7 or 8 number. So we'll see if maybe I can do that next week. The doc told me before the procedure that by week 6, I should be mostly back to full function. And so if that's the case, I'll probably throw 560 on there and just see what happens and see if my knee can handle it. So that's cool. Looking forward to that next week. Beyond that, Kim's gone the next 6 of 8 days. So I am super dad and trying to do soccer practices and school drop-offs and pickups and figure out what to do with them on the weekends when there is no school. So I'll have a busy life these next few days, but planning to still try to train over quiet time and whatever else. TV time is the best, quick. What I end up doing when the kids are here and I'm on full duty is I end up splitting my training up a lot. So it'll be 30 or 45 minutes at one point of the day and then 30 or 45 minutes at another point of the day. And that seems to work pretty well. So then moving on, Paragon programs have new cycles starting on 10/24. This is going to be the second in the series of 3 specialization cycles that we're doing. So this one is quads and shoulders, which is going to be super cool. Some really great feedback that I got on the last cycle, because it's really the first one that I've confidently used pieces of that progression model that you and I have talked about, the one that you're following, the one that I made the Instagram post about, where length and movements are starting at 5 reps from failure or something, and short movements are starting around 2 reps from failure, and then the short movements progress into partials and eventually beyond partials. So this cycle for Paragon, the prior one that's just ending, was glutes and back. And I've had a ton of feedback from people saying that the use of partials on these short movements has been just completely eye-opening for them. And I always knew that partials had the additive effect of, ensuring that you're actually at failure. That isn't why I use them really, because I kind of know when I'm at failure. I use them as additional stimulus. But the feedback that I've been getting from everybody is that, wow, I never really knew how many more I had in the tank until I started trying to do max partials and realizing that I'm actually getting full reps. So that has been a super cool, clandestine, unexpected benefit of utilizing these partial reps, and something that I know will be ubiquitous across cycles going forward. It's not going to change the way that I program, separating these movements out, and the way these movements are progressing through the meso is something that I think will stay for the long term. So really cool feedback to have on the first time implementing it. And I hope to be able to use reverse drop sets and maybe eventually lengthened only sets. I don't know if that's something that is suitable for the general programs, but I don't see why I couldn't do reverse drop sets and more lengthened specific partial work and stuff like that. So Excited about all of that. We have bands branded from Paragon coming in the next couple weeks. They should be out by early or mid-November. And we're also going to start using bands as options in the dumbbell only programs. It just opens up kind of the ability to program more creativity and to kind of emulate cables a little bit better than dumbbells can do, given that dumbbells are almost always going to be lengthened overloaded because you're fighting gravity. Using bands kind of allows us to change the resistance curve and emulate some of the more like biomechanic-y type movements that I like to program these days. So that is all of my updates. I feel like I've never been so efficient with them.
Yeah, before we move on, can you just adjust the gain down on your microphone? You're coming across like super like maxed out there. And then worst case scenario, if it is just on my end, we can just have it up in post.
Yeah, it's the same as it's always been. It didn't seem like it got knocked or anything. So
okay, cool.
Does it sound better?
It does now. Yeah.
Okay, cool.
So, I mean, we were joking about this before we got officially on. I really don't have any updates. I have one cool thing that I did that was new is we did a shrimp boil on Sunday, and that was super, super cool. What I was really surprised at, it was bone simple, like bone simple. You like boil, water in a big container on the stove, and then it's like you add in, I forget what went in first, like the potatoes and then the onions, and you just like chopped a couple things and you just like threw it in a bunch of Old Bay seasoning and it comes out amazing. The one thing I would say is like, if you are being super, macro conscious, there is smoked sausage in it, which is going to be super high in fat per its relative volume. But if you wanted to like get a little bit specific and choosy with a lower fat sausage option, it's a really like macro friendly meal. We have red skin potatoes, shrimp, corn on the cob, onions, and then whatever you would do for that. And it makes a grip of food. Like I felt kind of obnoxious as we were like dumping it out at the end. We had like two huge, what do you call them? Like oven sheets, like filled with food. And we were just like, there's no way in hell we could eat all this. So it could be a really fun thing if you're like someone with a bigger family or you have like, 5 teenage kids or something like that. It's a very simple meal and you get a grip of pretty decently quality food there to do. And it was
That's super cool. I love that. What did you mark down as your macros for that meal?
Oh, I don't remember, but it was a day, we did it on Sunday and I trained. I was already super sore from Saturday and I trained on Friday or Sunday too, because I was a day behind because I got blood work done on Friday. And I ate a lot of it. I think it was probably like a 1,200 calorie meal for me with like carbs were probably damn near 180 or something like that on the day. Yeah. Or sorry, on the meal, not on the day. That was like a 500 carb day for me for sure. Yeah. And nice. I blew out the fat. I blew out. I generally follow a super low fat diet anyway, but it was my protein was at like 270 on the day and carbs were like pushing 500 and stuff. So it was a big day, but coincidentally, right on Monday, then I had my highest weigh-in yet. I was like 196.8 or something like that of this kind of reverse period or gaining, winter. But then on Monday, I had an incredible pump from training. Like incredible. So I was like, oh wow, like maybe I'm still like a little under eating, even though my weight has been like climbing and stuff. But it was just like I had a massive Sunday night meal, and then in an unparalleled pump on Monday's training, which is when so much of my life is like Groundhog Day. So when you have these like outliers, I was like, something's different. You know what I mean? And the only thing I know is I just ate a lot more than I normally would for that last meal on Sunday.
Yeah. Interesting. Very interesting. What did you weigh today?
Today's Tuesday. Same exact thing. 2 days in a row. Identical. 196.9 or something like that.
Nice. Yeah. I was 196.4. So we are once again hanging out in the same pound range. Yeah. I like that. Yeah. Very cool. Okay, cool. Let's jump in and talk about some movements.
Yeah, let's do it. So, for all the listeners, Bryan and I will generally keep like notes in a shared Word document as we go through. So when I was putting mine in here, I really did my best to not look at any of yours because I didn't want them to influence, my decisions. Yeah. But what I did was I just followed the same body part layout that you have so that we're not like jumping all over the place.
Yeah.
So do you want to kick us off with chest?
Yeah. So real quick, before we get started, I think it's important that we have like a primary and a runner up for each body part. And the main reason for that is there's two reasons. A, it's really hard to choose. And B, a lot of times movements work in unison with other movements. And an example of that, just to start real quick, is like if you have quads, like maybe you want to put pendulum and hack squat as your two favorite, but that kind of like doesn't make a lot of sense because it would make much more sense to pair one of those with a leg extension. So I thought about it in that way when thinking of my two movements for each body part.
That is a really good anecdote to put in there because I shouldn't say very rarely, but in most case scenarios, you're never just going to be training like one movement for a body part. And following up with what you said, it doesn't make sense in a lot of contexts to do pendulum squat and then move into the hack squat as your secondary movement. So yeah, that's a really good point to bring up there.
Cool. Yeah, that's just the way I thought about it. So I mean, if you thought about it differently throughout the way you placed it, like that's fine too. But that's my kind of caveat for my choices. So getting into chest, I really just can't get away from the dumbbell fly press just on a flat bench. It's just been a staple for me for like 2 years now. And I really like it because it is such like a heavy lengthened overload movement where I'm doing it to even be more lengthened. I'm taking a 2 to 3 second pause at the stretch position of the movement and just kind of letting the pecs stretch out at the bottom, much like DC training used to do with Dante Trudel. But he would have you do flies. And then at the end, you would just hold the dumbbells in the extended position for as long as you could until they basically like fall out of your hands. So this is maybe a more prudent, like future version of that. But I think that there is some benefit in that deep stretch position there. So I've been doing my dumbbell fly presses that way, and I get a ton out of them. I mean, I know we don't use soreness as meaning a whole lot aside from possibly that you didn't do enough if you never get sore. That's the way I look at it anyways. But, this movement I've been doing for 2 years nonstop in my program, and still I can feel the fatigue and the stimulus from that movement in session, and then also post-workout and the next day. So it's a keeper for me. It seems to just be able to help maintain. I guess at this point, it's hard to say that I'm gaining much chest muscle, but that movement has been just one that I feel helps me maintain that muscle with an extremely low amount of volume, which then allows me to focus on other muscle groups a little bit more. So I really like that aspect of it. And then my second one is a cable sterno costal press, basically like a cable press that is slightly high to low, but mostly kind of just horizontal. And so I really like that. It has that natural, like wide to narrow converging path. And I would say that if I had access to a really good chest press machine, like the Atlantis converging one or one of the Prime converging ones, I would probably put that above my cable press. But I only get to use that when I go hang out at N1. So I'm going to stick with the cable press for now.
Yeah, so in what I was afraid would happen with this episode is we would end up choosing all the same things. And in traditional Bryan and Aaron form, here we are. So what is slightly different, and we've talked about this before, I personally am not a fan of that, cable fly press. We're all going to have those things where we just do not feel great performing for, different various reasons. And that is just one for me. But what I have as my number one is the converging chest press machine, like a selectorized one. Why I like the selectorized, I shouldn't say necessarily because there is an Atlantis one that is plate loaded, but it's incredibly smooth throughout. You get an incredibly smooth and consistent resistance path throughout the entire range of motion. Generally, your cable selectorized machines will better recreate that, but some are really, really good. Basically, like a seated, upright, converging chest press machine. What I like is you can really set yourself up to get a really good stretch in the lengthened position. And then because you get that converging arm path, you are getting pretty shortened as well. I wouldn't say not like fully shortened, but pretty damn close, much better than as opposed to like a dumbbell press or something, because the dumbbells are larger as you lift more. And then what I have for my, backup or secondary would be what Bryan described as a dual cable version of that converging chest press machine. That is, I would say, like one of the most underrated pressing movements. I really, really like it. It can, if you push it like well and hard, you can really, I would say if you're pressed on time, that might be like one of the, maybe a sole choice movement for me, sort of thing, for like a pushing movement.
Yeah, I may actually try that seated upright, because I do it kind of reclined with the cables coming from behind me to emulate more of the machine type. Yeah, exactly. But if it's more like, if I think of it more as like one of those pec deck machines where you grip the handles and you just kind of like squeeze together across the middle, that's like a bit different of an arm path, but I think it would be super effective. And I'm looking for some variation in my chest, so I may give that a go here coming up. And then just to clarify one thing, in the beginning, you said the thing you didn't like, and you said it was the cable press. What you meant was the dumbbell press, right?
Oh, sorry.
The fly press.
Yeah. Thank you.
It took me a little while going through listening to you to be like, wait a minute, I'm pretty sure there was a flaw there. So Aaron does not like my dumbbell fly press, but he does like the dual cable setup. Cool. Moving on to back. I separated back into basically 3 regions. I have upper back, rear delts, and lats. And then we also have delts as lateral delts and front delts. So we separated those into 3 regions as well. But starting with upper back, I have a chest supported row with wide elbows. So anytime we're training upper back, we're going to want the elbows to kind of be out at that like 70-ish degree from the torso range. And it really I feel pressed to like choose one, but I mean, T-bar, cable, and dumbbell are all like super solid for this. For the main important factor for me is the chest support, so that I can truly get that like deep stretch in the upper back over whatever the support is. And then I really like pushing against the pad too, as a way to like brace coming back up. So I guess if I had to be pressed and choose, I would say T-bar is probably my favorite. If you have a T-bar with wide arm path, then I would say cable, and I guess dumbbell would be my last choice, but cable and dumbbell are kind of in between. I would say the reason I would choose cable over dumbbell would just because it gets kind of annoying to have to carry like 90 or 100 pound dumbbells over and like throw your body over a bench like while holding 100 pound dumbbells. So just for that like minor inconvenience, I feel like I would go cables over dumbbells, but they're both super effective. And then my second one would be a wide pull down. So same arm path, pronated grip, wide arms, just pulling vertically more instead of horizontally. And that one you would definitely want to have your legs locked in, so that it's not like the way you do the iliac lat pull down where you're kind of just on a bench. You need to have your legs secured underneath those pads.
Yeah, I guess as I'm getting into mine, the way that I structured my 2 choices, it ends up being more of like, this is my top choice. And then if I'm in a gym environment where I can't do my top choice, like this is how I would emulate that with like a secondary choice.
I like that too. So that's a good way. Yeah.
So kind of like I said, I followed Bryan's layout. So with upper back, I have the chest supported upright, like machine row. So that's where you're going to be seated like vertically, chest supported. I really like a semi-pronated grip. This is one of those few times, like I said, that Bryan and I will differ. I really don't like the like elbows at like, 90 or 70. I feel like just very unstrong in that position. and it feels unstrong and unnatural. So I will generally take a little bit lower than 70, what might be considered almost like a rear delt rowing angle. But when you're pulling or what I find is like when I'm pulling like very, very forcefully in like that upper back row, you are pretty strong. I feel like the rest of the musculature will overtake the rear delts. Like I have to focus on like a rear delt row on the rear delts, or else I'll compensate, I guess is a really, really good term to use. So with that upper back, upper back machine supported upright row with like a semi-pronated grip. I really, really love anything chest supported for upper back, because it's going to basically save you from yourself and your ego of trying to overcompensate with your hips and raising the back and that sort of thing. And then as my backup there, what I have is what Bryan picked as number 1. So basically chest supported, plate loaded upper back row, where your feet are going to be on that plate. And then that's more like almost like a 45-degree angle, like you're laying down on top of it more. So the interesting thing there again is I really, really just like a semi-pronated grip. I feel so much better in that position. I don't get any kind of like joint angle alignment issues. So what I would say to the listeners is like play around with your grip, see what feels better for you. And you may need to grab like angles 90 or a D handle, or a D handle, D ring?
D handle, yeah.
D handle, and loop it around there to achieve that semi-pronated grip.
Yeah. That's interesting what you said about the elbow position wide not feeling good or natural, because I definitely feel that too, especially if I try to get to like 80 or 90 degrees. It's okay around 70 degrees. But I think the thing is that you can't expect to get, this is what I learned at least, you can't expect to get the same amount of scap retraction when you have your elbows higher. So the whole point of finding that position for the rear delts is the point where you can get the most scap retraction, because then your rear delts are going to essentially shorten the most at the top of the movement. So that was actually the test that Cass used at N1, was he was like, hey, finagle around with your elbow position, wherever you can get the most scap retraction, that's your rear delt line, So when you put those arms up higher, you're not supposed to get as much scap retraction. And once I stopped trying to get scap retraction as if I was doing a rear delt row, then that higher elbow position started to feel much more comfortable. So now I just think about it as initiating with almost like squeezing my lower traps together, or mid traps, like mid lower traps. I just think about squeezing those together to initiate the movement. And whenever those are squeezed together, I don't try to get any more scap retraction than that. And you can see it in the videos. The elbows don't go nearly as far back as they do with like that rear delt row setup where they're a little bit lower.
Yeah, that was a very, very good, helpful additional explanation on that.
Yeah, so maybe try it, see what you think with that in mind. Cool. So moving on to rear delts. My my movements are literally the exact same as my upper back ones, but we're just changing the elbow position. So it's the chest supported row, starting with T-bar and then cable and then dumbbell. And then I didn't even choose a second movement because I think that it would be that same pull down with the legs locked in. It would just be with, again, 45-degree hand grip and elbows traveling a little bit closer into the body. So we're basically doing the same movements with a different hand position for moving from upper back to rear delt.
Yeah, and mine kind of are too. And I mean, there is a slight bit of ambiguity between the upper back and rear delts. Like, it's not going to be like a very cut and dry, this is strictly rear delts, this is, strictly upper back.
For sure.
So in performing these, there's going to be some crossover and some blurred lines for sure there. What I have for mine is just a seated cable row with a semi-pronated mag grip. What I really like with the mag grip is that it's, I guess what would be like the middle width mag grip is it just lines everything up where I don't have to think about it. And I just know like here, when I'm at the lengthened, I'm in a perfect position. And as I row back, like obviously the grip width doesn't change. It puts me right in that retracted or shortened rear delt position. I love that. With that one, your rear delts really aren't that strong. I don't feel like I need the chest support or anything like that, which would be harder to set up there anyway. And I just do a traditional like seated, cable row with that grip. And I just know I know that position that I want to find. And I find that mag grip with the semi-pronated grip is just the simplest way to get me from lengthen to shorten without me having to modify much else.
Yeah, no, that's a good point about the ambiguity between the movements too, because like that wide pull down is often considered a rear delt or an upper back, or it's kind of just a bit of everything, right? So I think that ultimately shifting hand position or elbow position within a matter of 20 or 30 degrees, literally it might go from, hey, this movement is 60% upper back and 40% rear delt to 60% rear delt and 40% upper back. But I mean, no matter what, you're still working both when you do both.
Yeah. And then for my second one, which I will do often because not a lot of places have the mag grip, is where do I have it here? Prone incline rear delt DB row. So I set the incline on not a super steep incline, but not a low incline, like a medium, type incline. I then lay on it and I lay up enough to where maybe the top of the support's right at my upper abs. So my chest and shoulders can kind of round over the top of the bench, and then just the elbows, that kind of lines your rear delts up great with right on top of, gravity with the dumbbell directly under. And I just row straight up. And that one I do like too.
Yeah, you actually do that one really well. I've noticed your form on that. Cass featured it on one of the N1 photos last year, and you get to a really good short position for your rear delts that way.
Yeah, that one I'd say I probably feel that best, but it's hard to progress.
Yeah, for sure. Otherwise, it is maybe easy to progress, but you would compensate without realizing it type thing. That's kind of, because you do that with 50-pound dumbbells or something. You don't use super heavy weight, right?
No, yeah, it'd probably be 45, 50 max.
Yeah, so when I was looking at the video or the post that Cass made, he also had a picture of me doing it with 85s or something.
Yeah, nowhere near that much.
But my form's not as good as yours. So that's more the point I'm trying to make, is just that it's hard to progress because a very slight shift in the way that you're executing it can allow you to progress, and maybe you won't even realize that the way that you're doing it has changed slightly or gradually over time.
Yeah. That's a really, really good point.
Cool. So moving on to lats to finish up the back here. My number one is the one arm pull variations. I don't want to then separate lats into iliac lats and lumbar lats and thoracic lats and all that. So whatever angle you decide to work your lats at, whether it's a high to low, more iliac, or a more horizontal, lumbar type approach, I really, really like the braced one arm version of these movements. My current go-to is the one where I'm bracing back against a bench, because I feel like it provides me just a ton of stability, and I can really work that muscle without any sort of balance or stability issues. I'm also a fan of doing it, gripping braced on the functional trainer itself. That works super well too. And then I'll also add that I don't generally find myself doing a ton of work specifically for the thoracic lat region, which is the upper lat region. And the reason that is because I feel as we discussed with the ambiguity of these different movements, that a lot or almost all of the upper back work that I'm doing or rear delt work is also hitting my thoracic lats, given that their function is very similar to those functions and that they're higher up on the back. So I try to be as efficient as I can with my training, and I feel like spending time on the thoracic lats while I'm also doing a bunch of other specific upper back and rear delt work just kind of seems like too much for me. So I tend to focus on the high to low pull and then the horizontal pull for the iliac and the lumbar regions. And then my second choice would just be the same legs locked one that I described for the wide pull down, but now with a neutral grip and with the torso braced. So if you allow your back to get into like thoracic extension, where you're kind of sticking your chest up in the air, you're going to take some of the stimulus away from the lats and put it into the upper back. So generally what you want to do is keep your core braced down so that you're doing that pull down. You're lean back, but you're not opening your chest to do so. You're leaning back and kind of hunching forward and maintaining that position, which will help you kind of bias the lats a little bit more as you're doing that pull down with your legs locked in underneath.
Before I jump into mine, which are, of course, very similar, the one note I thought would be helpful to bring up, depending on the manufacturer of your kind of what's traditionally called like the lat pull down, where Bryan, like you just said, your legs are locked underneath, you may find it really hard to emulate what Bryan just said at the end, because sometimes the weight, the orientation of the cable is so far like back kind of over your head, where I've been in some where I'm like trying to do it lat focused and I just can't because it's way too far back. So just kind of know that you may run into that, and you might be like, why can't I, feel this in my lats, or why can't I line it up right? Sometimes like the angles are just off too much to be able to do that.
Well, just to add like one kind of practical piece for people, like this is definitely not one of my favorite movements for the lats, but it's the most accessible. And I even made an Instagram post on this, but you can find any single cable stack in your gym. It can even be like a traditional lat pull down, and you just, take the handle off and put a D handle on there. And then you just go and you kneel down on the ground, like just go and kneel down. And as long as you have it braced contralaterally, so if you're pulling down with your right arm, your left leg is forward, that will give you the stability so that you can work the lat extremely effectively. Not as effectively as if you're braced against a bench, the way that I described, but it's definitely accessible to just grab a cable pulley from somewhere and just kneel down, and suddenly you can do lat pull downs. So
I have a quick aside to touch on. So before we jump into it, my number one choice for the lat is the unilateral supported pull down as well. But one thing that I have found that I have in the last handful of weeks, I would say like 6 to 8 weeks of I've been performing them, noticed I don't like bracing it with like a knee on the bench with my hand like I was taught how to do it, and like I see everyone else doing it. I would find that it was like really taxing my core to try and like brace like that. And then one day I was like, I'm just going to see what happens if I sit on the bench facing it. And then like, let's say I'm pulling with my right hand, I jam my right foot into the front of where the bench sits on the ground. And I just like lock, not necessarily lock that leg out, but put pressure there to like square my hips, square my pelvis. And I love bracing it that way. It feels so much easier to me there. And I wonder like, if there's probably something I was doing wrong in version 1, if that feels so much easier for me, but also I'm just curious why I haven't seen more people doing it bracing it the way that I just described.
I don't know. I mean, I've done that before as well. It's a good question. I think I find it a little bit harder to keep the core kind of neutral, and that I find myself when I'm braced face down or face forward into a bench, I feel more likely to maybe want to arch backward as the reps get tough. So that would be like maybe my first thought. Second thought would be that maybe it changes the angle. Like in some people's cases, it changes the angle and makes it too steep. Like if you're that close to the cable stack, that maybe kneeling on the bench and pushing back gives you enough space so that you can keep your shoulder from getting too high, which would then deactivate a little of the lat at the top of the rep. But those are just, small concerns. I think if that way works for you, there's really no reason that you shouldn't do it.
Yeah, the last thing I will say there is I actually, I'll post this up, I'll try to remember to do it a week from today when the episode comes out. But I actually filmed one today of me doing that, and the bench is too far upright, and I do lose a little bit of that like hollow core positioning. So yeah, that's the last thing I would add there is if you are going to do it that way, you would probably want to set the bench one notch less vertical if you want to sit on it, so that you can kind of lean forward a little bit more.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, but then you would need to compensate for the fact that you're now moving even closer to the cable stack. Yeah. So you have to like somehow figure out a way to separate the bench further back while still having the stability of the bench not sliding. So maybe it just adds like an additional layer of complexity to the setup.
Yeah, it probably may. Yeah.
Do you have a second one?
I do. And what I have here is seated cable row, lat focus. That's like a lumbar lat focus. This is one where, depending on the weight stack I have available, I will either do unilaterally or bilaterally. So this is one where I feel pretty good personally about my ability to perform bilaterally with like a quality stimulus in each. I cannot replicate that with like the bilateral chest supported row with both arms at the same time. I do much better unilaterally there, but seated cable row, again, kind of lean forward a little bit like Bryan was describing, keeping the elbows really, really narrow. That one I feel like is really accessible in a lot of gyms, should be really easy to do, neutral grip, approximately shoulder width. And then in the event that you don't have that, or you just want to set it up, with a single cable stack, you can do it unilaterally as well. Like I just did that today at the gym before the podcast, and I get a great stimulus from it.
Yep, totally. No, I love how you're taking the approach of having the accessible movement second, because that definitely adds like a practical element for the listener too. Cool. So moving on to lateral delts. These are the ones on the side, right? The ones that make you get that wide up top so that you get that small waist look, that illusion. My my two favorite movements for the side delts are the same movement, one single arm and one both arms. So I like to, actually the single arm one is more accessible, but it also happens to be my favorite. So basically the key to this movement is that you get the body and the cable lined up in such a manner that your arm is traveling in the scapular plane versus directly to the side. So what I usually do to facilitate this is I grab the cable behind my back. So imagine me like grabbing the cable behind my back with my left arm, and then I walk out a couple steps so I feel a small stretch on my side delt, and then I'll turn my body by just a little bit like this. So if you're watching on YouTube, otherwise, I guess you're just going to have to guess that I'm turning my body about 30 degrees. And then you're going to lift your arm up. And what you'll find is that after you turn your body 30 degrees forward from directly to the side, that your arm will follow suit and will travel 30 degrees in front of your body. So that's my favorite. I really, really like it single arm. And the only reason that I would choose single arm in this case over the dual cable lateral raise is because it really, really frustrates me when the cables come behind my back and the balls cross over each other. And that just like, it distracts me so much rep to rep. And one time, maybe a few months ago, they were behind my back and the balls crossed and the clips connected to each other. So imagine my surprise when I go to try and raise my arms up and literally nothing happens. And so since that moment, it's been like even a further distraction to me because I'm like constantly worried and preparing for it to happen again. So anyway, I think the dual cable version is fantastic as well. But I really am digging the single cable version right now.
So this one was hard for me to answer because I'll I guess jump into why. My first exercise I put here is prone incline lateral delt, dumbbell raise. It is a shortened overload movement. For a best movement of any body part, it's probably in your best interest, or Bryan and I's best interest, to provide a lengthened overload in terms of hypertrophic stimulus. The one that, and the reason I didn't is I would say of all the body parts, lateral delts probably take the longest to learn how to perform properly. Mm-hmm. And the cable ones, there's still days where I'll do some of the cable ones and I'm like, I don't think I did that right today. And some of that is to do with my lifestyle and being in new gyms and setting it up, constantly learning how to set it up again. But it's something that I know what I'm looking for now and I think I get it. And then I'm like, I don't think I did that right. And it does still frustrate me a little bit. So in that, I was like, I'm going to give the listeners something that's pretty much foolproof, and that's put the put the bench on an incline, a steeper incline, stand on the back of it, on the back pegs, or not pegs, legs, so that it's not going to slide forward on you when you put all your body weight into it. Set your chest on it, and then lateral raise. Obviously not quite straight out, but in the scapular plane, like Bryan described, it's really hard to fuck up. Keep your elbows pretty much straight. Don't swing it from the bottom. Keep your chest on the incline, and it's, like I said, it's pretty hard to not to mess that one up and not get a lateral delt stimulus there.
Yeah, that one's kind of like a hybrid between a lateral raise and a Y raise.
Yeah,
I like that too.
Yeah, I would say like that, or do them seated. Like ever since I'm about to say this and then I got to walk myself back because of what I put under number 2. But like, if you're someone who generally doesn't perform, lateral raises right, or they give you issues and stuff, perform them, prone on a bench, like incline or seated, and you'll probably find you have to drop the weight probably considerably in order to perform them, but your mechanics should improve there.
Cool. And your second one?
Yeah, what I put, so this is kind of like a cheating answer. This one isn't necessarily a movement per se, but it is a CAS set of medial delts. And the best thing that I would say is to find this, go on YouTube and find the Gym at Prospects YouTube channel and Google medial delt CAS set. So that, Bryan, can you remind me of that gentleman's name again that I can never seem to remember?
Oh man, I forgot it.
Is it Bryan? It's like Bryan or Dave or
Dave. Wait, no.
I'm so bad with names.
Dan Feldman.
Dan. Okay, Dan. Yes. Yeah, so Dan has an incredible demonstration of this over there. He explains it really, really well. If you're someone who like me for years, I'm like, man, I just can't really feel it in my lateral delts. If you do this, it will work. It's like foolproof. So if you were ever looking to use that or add a little spice in there, you can really only do 2 sets of it, 2 max, because it smokes you. But it's pretty easy to set up. It'll just be dual cable and 1 single set of dumbbells. So just bring the dumbbells over to the cable. But that'll be a good one.
Sick. That sounds good. I'm going to go check that out after this as well.
Yeah.
Cool. So moving on to front delts. My number 1 is actually not a press, and I flip-flopped on these because I think that we're programmed to think that we need to have like a compound pressy type movement as our primary movement. So I struggled with this a little bit, but ultimately I just feel better and feel like I get a better stimulus doing a low to high cable raise. So essentially having the cables set at the bottom or near the bottom. You could change the resistance curve and make it a little more lengthened if you raise them up to wrist height, but that's as high as you would want to go. Otherwise, it doesn't work. So I usually go somewhere between. So it's more of like a mid-range overload, not quite wrist height, but not quite at the very bottom. And then I'll grab the balls themselves, or I'll put D handles on and usually grab the strap of the D handle. So instead of using the actual handle itself, I like to push against the strap with my hand. I actually tend to do that for a lot of movements, but I just realized I forgot to put arms on our list of favorite movements. So we'll have to make sure we put arms in there too. But then I grab the straps and basically you just raise from like a wide position to a high narrow position, and you'll get a little bit of clavicular upper pec in there as well. And I just love that movement. And then the anterior delt press is my second. And I think I prefer cables over dumbbells. The dumbbells at this point just don't feel great on my shoulders in any type of like vertical pressing. So I prefer cables. And then if I had to, I would use dumbbells as a backup.
So this is one where I actually, thinking back about in keeping uniform with how I did describe it, my favorite is the anterior delt press. I prefer it with cables as well. it's just so infrequent that I've been able to actually use it because of equipment availability. I had put the anterior delt DB press, in my top spot, but I do really like the cable press because it's so much easier and consistent to push to like pretty much to failure because of the nature of the cable and the, smoothness of the resistance profile. Because with the dumbbell, it's like you hit that, there's nothing left. Like you can't grind it out pretty much. Whereas with the cable, you really, really can push to failure where you get like a really incredible stimulus in that anterior delt. So lining that up, it's really, really fun to push there. And then as my backup, just the anterior delt DB press, even though I end up doing this one way more often. But this is one where it just feels really natural and good for me. This was one of those things like once you pretty much introduced me to like N1 and I started going down the rabbit hole of learning things and then like, oh, wow, doing, a DB press this way, immediately I was like, this feels so much better. Like it was like one of the first things where I was like, I really like this. I just felt a lot stronger, more powerful in it. And I do get a good stimulus of the anterior delts. And it's like a fun exercise for me to progress. But I will say, if I had to choose one in equipment, availability and having like a narrow, close together, like dual cables, like a functional trainer, actually, the cable version is better in my opinion.
Cool. Do you want to jump into arms?
Yeah, let's do it. So you want to start with triceps or biceps?
Let's do biceps. The number one by far favorite movement for me is the D handle face away cable curl. There's like not even really like a second one for me at this point. That one just slays my biceps so hard. And then I think that my second choice, just out of the nature of choosing a movement that I think would accompany that pretty well, would be like a short overloaded elbows forward type curl. So I like any sort of cable spider curl or cable concentration curl or anything along those lines.
Yeah, I would agree with number one. That has to be like the best pretty much across the board. It's more lengthened. Everything lines up really easily. You're not really going to be experiencing much joint pain in anything there. One that I like that checks the boxes for how you described the second, but is a little bit different is I would like a machine preacher with a cable stack. Traditional preacher curl with like the plate loaded easy bar. It scares me. It puts a really hard stress on like my bicep tendon in there. It doesn't feel great for me. So it's the machine is a way that I can basically get a great stimulus. It's going to be a little bit more mid-range to shortened overload, but doesn't put me in like a compromised position that I feel.
Yeah, it's the pad underneath the tricep that creates that like super uncomfortable stretch at the bottom of the preacher curl. Yeah, and so if you just remove that pad, it like changes the resistance profile completely and shortens it instead of lengthens it.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Okay. Sweet triceps. So my number one for triceps, and the reason that I thought, oh shit, we skipped arms, was because every time I do my one arm cable overhead tricep extension, I use the D handle, and then I put my hand on the strap of the D handle instead of gripping the handle itself. And I really like how that lines up. So when your arm is behind your head, it just lines up so perfectly that all you really need to do is think about extending the elbow at the top. Instead of anything else. Like there should be no distraction. I really, really like to set this one up so that the cable is about just below my neck height, which means it's going to be a little bit more lengthened overloaded. So if you were to move the insert pin on the cable stack down, then you're going to get more resistance at the top and it would be more shortened overloaded, which is cool too, because it trains at long muscle lengths. So if you want to do it at long muscle lengths and overload the short position, you can kind of get the best of both worlds. But at this time, I'm currently on this like super hard lengthened everything bandwagon. So I'm training at long muscle lengths and I'm overloading the lengthened position. So I put that cable stack just behind my neck and it's the heaviest that it's going to be right at the bottom. And then as you get toward the top, you'll just feel a very slight drop off of resistance so that you can lock out, and then you'll feel your tricep about to like rip off your lat as you're descending back down again. So huge fan of that one. And then my second favorite is literally just the perfect accompaniment for that one. Like I feel like between that and the cross cable tricep extension, which you can do single arm as well. So accessibility, if you're in a crowded gym, you don't need to have dual cables. You can literally set your body up with one cable and just do that same cross the body motion. And that one is great as well. And so both of those movements train the long head of the tricep, which is the one that crosses the shoulder joint, and probably the one that responds best to training at long muscle lengths as well. And the thing with the long head is that it really only works when the arm is extended like this. So you can kind of get that if you're lying down and doing one of those like skull overs on a bench, you can kind of get the long head to hit as well. But it really does need your body to be in shoulder extension for the long head to work. So anytime that your triceps work when you do presses, like when you're doing a dumbbell press or close grip bench or basically any type of pressing movement, it's going to be your lateral and medial heads that are primarily doing the work. And so for that reason, in my goal to be as efficient as I can with training, I tend to bias most of my tricep work to the long head and let the medial and lateral heads kind of just get worked with the pressing movements.
Yeah, I mean, I love everything you said there. I agree. One thing that I will do with the lengthened overhead tricep extension and then that kind of like cross, push down, push back sort of one is I will superset those. So I'll do the lengthened overhead one first, and then I'll drop the cable stack down a little bit to line it up better and do that kick back and then put it back up, switch to my other arm. And that's like a very simple tricep one to set up. And what I have actually done is I got a pair of like, maybe they're ankle cuffs, like wrist cuffs. And then I just put the cuff like around my palm.
Yep.
And that's like, and then it's like kind of similar to like what you do, except I would imagine it's probably just a little bit more comfortable. And that lines up so well. Cause then like when you grip, a lot of us people, like when we grip, you have the tendency to like turn your wrist in, and that kind of like changes the angle a little bit. So when you have that cuff, it's like, it's just like, you just extend the elbow. It's just simplifies things. And then it takes some of that like gripping out of it. And then the other one that I really do like, and this is probably like 85% of the tricep exercises I'll do unless someone else is doing my programming and they're like, no, Aaron, we're going to do this now, is that kind of like over the shoulder, like medial delt type of press. And that one I really like because I can like lean into it, and find where it really stretches. And then all I do is just like punch out in front of me. This one is hard to really describe. For if any of the listeners, if you want, just ping me on Instagram and I'll be like, yeah, here's the exercise. It's one we learned at N1. I don't think they have a great name for it, but the cables run like right over your traps. And it's pretty much just like you find where they stretch really good and then you just like punch forward. It's almost like a pressing motion, but it will beat up your triceps like really, really well.
So I love that one too, but it is like the most inaccessible movement. I have never, in my gym, I can't do it in my basement. And I've never actually been to a gym that has two cables like directly next to each other like that. You literally have to, I don't know where I would even, I can't even picture what that would look like in a commercial gym.
So I do it single arm, or you get the daisy chains, and then that gives you enough length to not like hit the back. Cause I remember I sent you something on Instagram the other day. I was like, whoa, here's a version of how we can do these, right?
Yeah.
The gym I'm at has 2 ropes. I tried to set it up. I couldn't even get anywhere near extension before the back of the ropes were hitting my neck. So I was like, what do they have, like super long ropes in that video? A daisy chain will fix that. You'll just need, one, and then you can obviously just put it in the middle and then you get the extra like 4 feet you need. But
no, that's a good call, actually. Yeah, I should consider that as an option too. That is a great movement. And then on the note of the cuffs, this is actually, how like in life sometimes like something is brought up and then you feel like you see it all the time, right? Like oh, you read a book and there's like elephants everywhere, and then suddenly like everything you see is elephants.
Yeah.
So I feel like cuffs are like that for me in the last few days. Like they keep showing up everywhere. And then one of my clients asked me like, hey, can I do this movement with cuffs? And then you brought up the cuffs. And so I've already been thinking, man, maybe I need to start using cuffs in these movements where I said I grip the strap of the D handle, because it's the same idea. Just like, as you said, it almost adds a little bit more bulk and makes it a little bit more comfortable.
Yeah.
So I think that the universe has spoken to me, and this is the grand sign from the gods that I need to start using cuffs as well. So I will be implementing that now.
I'll send you the pair I bought. They're super. They're good.
I have them. No, I have them already. Yeah,
already have them?
yeah.
Fair enough.
Yeah, I just haven't been using them. So
okay.
Yeah. Okay, cool. So moving on away from arms, we have quads. And this is the example that I provided in the beginning where I was saying, I'm not going to pick pendulum and hack squat as my two favorites, or pendulum and leg press or whatever, because they're both squat style pressing movements. So I went ahead and I chose pendulum and leg extension. And then I have the caveat that the leg extension should be able to have resistance curve adjusted for best practice. Like, you should be able to make it short or make it lengthened. And if you can't make your leg extension lengthened, which I would say 98% of leg extensions cannot be lengthened, then you should also use sissy squats. So I guess that gives me like 3 movements: sissy squat, or like a reverse Nordic / bodyweight leg extension, like one where you can get the length in position of the rect fem. Because essentially, our listeners probably know this for the most part, but the rectus femoris, the biggest quad muscle that runs from the knee through the hip, is the only one that attaches to below the knee and above the hip. So it only works when when the hip is not flexed. So when you do a normal squat pattern movement, your hip is also moving. The rectus femoris doesn't work. So in the pendulum squat, we're going to get the other 3 quad muscles. And then we'll need the leg extension and or the sissy squat to train that rectus femoris muscle.
Yeah, so this one was hard for me. This is something I don't think I've talked about it or brought it up, but I think, and I may eat my words in the future at some point, which I am perfectly okay with, I think I prefer the hack squat over the pendulum. And the whole reason I say that is I feel like it's easier to find a really comfortable bottom position with most hack squats as opposed to the pendulum, because aside from that Predator pendulum, so shout out to Predator Strength and the pendulum that they created with Cass, a lot of them will make assumptions around the angle and stuff. And I've been in some where I'm like, even the Atlantis one, it's not like perfect in the bottom position. I can't, if I move my feet up a little bit more, it's like too much kind of like glute and not enough quad, but where I want my feet, it will start to like lift me off my heels at the bottom. And granted, if I like had one in my house, I would obviously like modify it to whatever suits my needs. But I'd say I found that in the most accessible, you're probably going to be able to get a hack squat more set up perfectly to find that really quality bottom position.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not going to argue that a hack squat's probably a little bit, well, it's definitely more accessible. And as far as more accessible to find the bottom position, that is, I guess, debatable. I think that like my pendulum squat at home is not like a nice one. It was under $2,000 compared to the Predator, which is probably $10,000, and the Atlantis, which is like $7,000 or something. Yeah. But the small manipulation of just putting the prime wedges on there creates the perfect pendulum for me. Like, it feels like chef's kiss perfect. So yeah. I would say it actually felt better than the Predator one, to be honest. So yeah, I mean, I think, like, to your point, if you had your own, then of course you would be able to manipulate it and set it up in the manner that was perfect for you. And within a standard gym setting, you're probably not going to see a pendulum anyways. So it's kind of like, they're asking what my favorite movement is. Like, I'm going to say pendulum because that's what it is. But yeah. To be honest, like, it doesn't matter if it's a pendulum or like a hack squat or a leg press, whichever one feels really good for you and allows you to smash the quads most effectively is going to be the best one.
Yeah. What I have for number 2, I again, very similar to you, put a lengthened biased leg extension, and then what I have in here is in parentheses rare. I was fortunate that, when I was in Bali, there was this gym I would go to on one day of the week, just because they had a leg press that I could literally put my heels into my butt cheeks, range of motion that felt great. And they had a lengthened overload leg extension. It was by Techno Gym. The range of motion on it was like absurd, but I could get an incredible quad stimulus from it. And I was like, I want this machine so bad. Like, I just want to find it somewhere on the internet and like ship it to a shipping container and for whenever I come back to the States. But it's a game changer when you get one that will challenge you more in that lengthened position. And then the last thing that I thought would be a helpful add-in, because I know we get, some garage gym listeners and, functional training type facility listeners, a reverse heavy sled drag will be another probably really good quad one that will train like terminal knee extension well in a gym equipment environment where you generally can't train terminal knee extension well.
Interesting idea. I like that. Cool. Moving on to hams. I have 2 different pairings here because I talked about, I'm thinking about this as pairing 2 movements together instead of as my absolute favorites. So for the listeners that you may or may not know, I took RDLs out of my programming for the first time. All right. So since CrossFit, I used to deadlift. Then post CrossFit in 2016, 17, I started doing bodybuilding, and basically RDLs have been in my program for 6 straight years in some variation. But I took them out 5 or 6 weeks ago for the first time ever. And I did this for a few reasons. I can get into that in another episode. But since taking them out, what I've done is increased the volume of my 45-degree hip extension and even more so of my leg curls. So my leg curl machine is one of those cool ones that you can adjust the resistance profile on. So I do a bunch of leg curls short overloaded. Then I'll go into my hip extension, which is inherently short overloaded, but I do some manipulations through elevating the machine, through doing lengthened only partial reps where I choose heavy ass dumbbells and don't go to the actual short position at all. So I kind of make that 45-degree hip extension as lengthened as I can. And then I'll go back to the leg curls and I'll do them lengthened. So that's my kind of sequence right now for hamstrings, and it tears me up. It is so effective. And so that is my number 1 pairing is 45-degree hip extension with seated leg curls. And then I have a second one for those of you that do not have a seated leg curl, which trains the hamstring, the longer muscle length. You get the lying leg curl paired with an RDL variation. And I chose the B stance dumbbell RDL because I have never actually programmed it into a cycle for myself for, many months in a row. I've kind of messed around with it for a couple weeks here and there. And every time I do, I'm always so amazed and impressed at the stimulus that I can get without having to use such a heavy weight that the systemic fatigue on the midline and the spine and stuff is not nearly as significant as it is when you're doing the bilateral version. So I love the B stance dumbbell RDL, and then I'm actually planning to add RDLs back into my program here in the next meso with a B stance cable RDL. So I don't have much experience with that. I've only done it once to kind of decide that I wanted to include it in my program coming up, but I was a huge fan of it. So I'll have more updates on what I think of that B stance cable variation down the road.
I like that. I think that'll be really, really cool. Anytime I've done that B stance stuff, it tears me up. It's like it's like humbling because you can't load it really heavy because like you're not in a really good stable weight or way to load it. But I mean, yeah, it will light you up. It's super underrated right there. For me, what I have, this one was kind of hard for me where I was typing, what I feel like is right. I'm using like air quotes here. And then I really just had to be honest with myself. Like, these are my favorites and I shouldn't do what is like, right. And this is kind of what's cool is this is exactly what you did too, Bryan. Seated hamstring curl, right? It's by far my favorite hamstring movement for a number of reasons. One, it's not like technical to set up. Like, you lock yourself in, you can brace yourself with your upper body and you just whatever, it wouldn't be extend the knee, flex the knee. I guess that would be proper terminology, right? You just flex the knee and you can set it up and configure it to where you're getting like you're training that longer muscle length, and you can just beat them up without having to worry about like bracing your core really well or, keeping a neutral spine and like all of these, more challenging aspects that you need to do with a a traditional like esque barbell hinge. And then what I have here is a stiff-legged deadlifts off the ground. And I think that's a little bit of like ego, not trying to let that like die. I do like that movement, but I can guarantee you as I continue to age, I will train it less and less. And instead what will go in that place is the 45-degree, hip extension with dumbbells. Or you could use a barbell there as well. But again, it's just, you get the same stimulus without the like what's the word? It's like a war term. It's called collateral damage, right? Without the collateral damage of like zapping your CNS and fighting your core brace and all of these things. Yep. So it's almost like, it's like a more wise choice with all things considered, especially like that kind of collateral damage sort of thing.
Yeah. No, I mean, that pairing is so good together, the seated leg curl with the hip extension, because it's naturally going to be a short overloaded movement. And then you have the seated leg curl, which trains it at long muscle lengths. So yeah, if you're going to, it's like, I think the studies or whatever, I don't know if it's studies or common anecdote, but it's generally going to be like an RDL with a lying leg curl or a seated leg curl with like a 45-degree hip extension are going to be like great pairings together. And so I tend to find the same, and I really like that. Cool. The last two we have are glutes, glutes, abs, and calves. These can probably be pretty quick. For glutes, single leg squat pattern movements. I have a rear foot elevated split squat is for sure my favorite. And then any type of lunge, really, like a straight up dumbbell walking lunge smashes my glutes. I think you could even make it more hip dominant potentially by putting that bar on your back and doing it like a low bar style as you're lunging, where you're getting a bit of hip flexion there. So a number of different ways you can do that. And then I have a note here just that glute bridges and glute hip thrusts are like an afterthought when it comes to actually building your glutes, because they're short overloaded movements with small range of motion. And you're just going to get a lot more stimulus for your time with those single leg squat patterns.
Yeah, what I have on mine, Bulgarian split squat is the number one. As much as this is just a personal preference. I personally still like doing it with my like toes on the bench, or I guess would be like the top of my toes. Yeah. Anytime I've tried to do it with my like the ball of my foot there, it's harder for me. And I will do them in a different way. And what I will do is like, the front foot wedge, rear foot elevated split squat. I will have my ball and my toes there. But when I'm just doing like a traditional, John Meadows style Bulgarian split squat, contralaterally loaded, and like it fucking beats me up. I have it in my program right now. It's on my second lower day, it's my only exercise. I do one hard set to failure. And now 2 weeks in a row, I am unbelievably sore from it.
Yeah, I think I need to add those back in, man. It's been a minute since it's been a while. And
I try, like I just put a story up on my Instagram, like, 2 days ago. I really try and like push my knee forward and get as much like quad, contribution to it, but it crushes my glutes. So that one is just like tried and true, just if you put that in and train it hard, like your butt's going to get bigger for sure.
Yeah. You and I have talked about this on the podcast that like, even when you try to make it as quad dominant as possible, the best you can hope for is still like a 50% quad, 50% glute type thing. So no, I fully agree with you, man. Like it's the sledgehammer. Like if you throw in one set of those at the end of your leg day, that's all you need. You're just done.
Yeah. All you need. Yeah. And then the other one I have, like that I think could be a little bit easier to set up potentially is a deficit reverse lunge. So front foot's going to be elevated on maybe like a 4 to 6 inch platform. I, again, just prefer a contralateral load. I'm going to hold on to a support so I don't have to worry about balance being a limiting factor. And I'm going to step backwards and lunge. If you're someone has some patella tendonitis type of knee problems, this could probably be a better option for you as well, moving backwards.
Yeah. No, I like that. I love the deficit reverse lunge as well, especially hand supported.
Yeah.
The only problem I find with that like single dumbbell hand supported loading is you really do have to do it at the end of your workout. Because if you try to do that at the beginning, you'd have to hold like a 200-pound dumbbell or something.
Oh yeah. Yeah. I'll do it in the Smith machine too sometimes.
Yes. No, that's a good call as well. Moving on to abs, straight up. We did our ab experiment last year. You and I over the summer, we both decided to train abs after not training abs. I'm pretty much back to not training abs. I would say that like I write them in my program twice a week, and I would say I do them 1 out of every 8 times. So like I would say once a month they come up and I'm like, I have 10 minutes. I should do some abs, So they get really sore for like 4 or 5 days. And then I'm like, I'm good for the month, But the ones that I do when I do them are either cable crunches with like the super small range of motion. So you're really just trying to extend at the spine and flex at the spine. You're not really trying to do hip flexion. Then curl ups, which are essentially like the same exact idea as a cable crunch, where you're just going to extend at the spine and flex at the spine. So it's this super small range of motion that you can do on the ground, or I prefer to do them on the GHD kind of hanging off. So it's like a decline. And I can only do like 10 reps as a max set to failure, which is perfect that I don't have to add any weight or anything. It's just that hard if I'm doing it hanging off the edge of a GHD. And then Gar hammer crunches. I don't really do them too often, but I had to demo them for a Paragon video last week. And I did like 6 reps and my abs were like cramping up on me. And everyone at Paragon loves Gar hammer crunches. Essentially what that is it's like a lying leg raise, but instead of actually raising your legs, which would be like hip flexion and extension, you're just going to kind of lift your legs up so they're almost vertical. And you're just going to do the exact same movement of flexing your spine and extending your spine. And so your legs are literally just going to be the lever, the rotation point. Instead of your torso being the rotation point, it's just going to be your legs. But it's that same idea of just flex and extend the spine. So it's this, 3 to 5 inch range of motion or something like that.
Yeah. So I have a new one that I've actually been doing, and I have actually been training my abs consistently. I do 2 sets twice per week. And the thing is, they're sore 7 days a week. But on the one day I have a weighted Swiss ball crunch. And what I really did with my abs, like I'm just going to train. I'm going to pick 2 movements that overload them in the lengthened position. And that's what I'm going to do. And the thing, what I like about the Swiss ball crunch is you literally just keep rolling back until your back is like completely arched and they are completely stretched. And then I just like will crunch up from that position. And man, it fucking crushes me. Like it crushes me. I do 2 sets. The first set I can usually get like 10 or 11. The second set's usually around like 6. And next thing I know, I wake up in the morning and they're toast.
Yeah. That sounds like my GHD curl ups. Like we're getting the same numbers.
Very
basically.
Similar. Yeah, but just a little bit more like back supported. And then the second one I do, ab wheel. I do them with like a more of a hollow position. I was actually trying to show this to a client this week, and I was like pulling up Google to try and show every version of them. If you hit Google, people have their like necks arched and they're looking up. Like, don't do that. Look kind of like down at your chest, kind of create like a turtle shell with your back and roll out that way. And you will put so much more of the stimulus like through your abs. And I do that. I touch my nose on the ground. I know some people might think that's gross in the gym, but it keeps me honest. And I can probably only do like 11 on the first set. Second set drops again to like 6 or 7, and I'm literally smoked.
Yeah. Have you tried one yet on your toes?
No, I just can't do it.
I don't think I
can't do it.
Amazing.
I don't think I can. I don't even think I get out, let alone back.
Yeah, you don't need much, man. You don't need much.
Yeah.
All right. So calves, I have one movement basically. It's the deficit single leg dumbbell calf raise. Hold the dumbbell in the same leg as the leg that's working. Other legs hanging off the side. You're using your other hand to support on like a power rack beam, or I actually just do them on the stairs. I grab the railing of the stairs with one hand and I hold the dumbbell in the other hand and do my calf raises that way. And then I just, for the first time last week, decided to be innovative and try a single leg deficit calf raise holding a D handle on my cable stack. So it's literally the exact same movement that I just described, but instead of using a dumbbell, it's using a cable stack. And I honestly don't think there's a bit of difference in the way that it feels. It's equally hard at every point of the range of motion, and it's just a variation that maybe sometimes I'll do if I don't feel like carrying a dumbbell around with me.
Yeah. I would say what I like there is something where I'm loaded at the hip. So like think like your linear hack, right, Bryan? If I'm going to load that, it's seated at the hip. I keep my hips bent, and then I'm just going to do calf raises there. Obviously, leverage the stretched position, but I just find it like it's just simpler to execute than when like the bar is on your back or whatever, because you're taking that hip, not support, but like you're removing an entire articulating joint from it, and it's just simpler.
And it's less fatiguing. You don't have spinal loading.
Exactly. And I personally don't like the one where you're pressing moves. That just fucks with me. I want the pressing platform to stay rigid, and what is going to move is like the weight or load at my hip or whatever. So there's like the angle, seated ones, or you can even do it on like a hack squat or whatever and just drop the thing down, low to where you can just lean forward on it. But that's pretty much what I will do 9 out of 10 times.
Yeah, I'll actually change my answer and say that the deficit single leg calf raise is my second favorite, and that doing them on the leg press at Cass's gym, and I forgot about him because I've only been able to do this once, but like who goes to N1 and trains calves, But but I did calf raises on the leg press machine that they have there, the Atlantis one, and it was perfect. I mean, you get that deep stretch position. You can load it up. There's tons of stability. The negative to my deficit single leg calf raise is that you have to hold something. So if you can eliminate even another matter and just, lock yourself in with a back pad and just go, that's even better. I've tried to rig up my pendulum and my little hack squat linear sled thing to do calf raises on it. And I can't do it. It actually comes with a calf bar that you can insert into the platform, and it sits like 2 inches above the platform, and then you can do calf raises on it. But I can't use that. I don't know how anyone uses it because I can't get a stretch position at the bottom. It's not nearly high enough. It needs to be like 4 inches tall instead of like 2 inches or whatever. But if that thing were able to do that, would be perfect. But I'll just stick with my single leg calf raises, I guess.
Yep.
Cool. That's all we got.
Cool. So, I mean, today's episode was a lot of fun, a little longer than normal, but a lot of body part to cover. Yeah. I think episodes like this are super helpful. What I also always find funny is like how aligned we are with different things. So
much of our choices are based on, I think, our experience and what equipment we generally have access to. And so my choices are very heavily influenced by the equipment that's in my home gym, which, as robust as it is, it certainly lacks some elements that are relatively common in commercial gyms. Yeah.
But I think a lot of it's like pattern based and knowing what you're looking for and then manipulating your environment to allow you to, find that stimulus.
Yep, for sure.
Cool. As always, guys, thank you for listening. Bryan and I will talk to you next week.